I just hope that they see themselves in the crevices of my film and they feel validated in some way, because I think that that's what I sought when I was young, is some sort of validation that felt real and authentic and not manufactured.
The stories we see about ourselves have the power to shape our future. In this series, we'll honor some of the most groundbreaking moments of queer Latina representation in TV and film. Moments that grounded us in history, made us feel seen, and humanized our existence in front of and behind the camera. Join us in uplifting the images, the artists, the stories, the visions of us. Lesbian representation for Latina people has always been few and far between. In earlier years, we found ourselves grasping at any coded language, lingering stares or shifting innuendo that would include us in the narrative. And although there were certainly lesbian characters who came before her, one of the most beloved would be just down the hallways of our favorite high school TV show.
What I've realized is why I'm such a bitch all the time. I'm a bitch because I'm angry. I'm angry because I have all of these feelings. Feelings for you that I'm afraid of dealing with. Because I'm afraid of dealing with the consequences. And Brittany, I can't go to an Indigo Girls concert. I just can't. I understand that.
Before Glee, the landscape for representation for queer Latinas on television was pretty abysmal. I think that if you would have to point to something, the closest that we had was the L Word. Carmen was this devout family girl. Papi was kind of this Latin Lothario, this like lover of women. And so while they were both representation in the most technical sense, they were not what I would consider to be quality or authentic representation of our communities. And beyond them, it was a barren desert. So that is kind of the world in which Santana Lopez entered.
I think I can take a couple of queers and a girl.
Okay. See, here's what's gonna go down. Two choices. You stay here and I crack one of your nuts, right or left, that's your choice. Or you walk away and live to be a douchebag another day. Oh, and also, I have razor blades hidden in my hair. Tons, just all up in there.
We could handle that.
It was more fun doing it together.
I'm absolutely a Gleek. I was that person who was showing up every week to watch the show. I was buying the albums when they were released. Like, I was a huge fan of Glee, even though I was not their target audience. I was definitely well in my 30s by that point. But I loved the show, and I think it's just that it was the experience I wish I had had. You know, I watched the show and I looked at characters like Santana and just wished that I had been bold enough to step into my truth and just be myself and find community.
So the first time it's mentioned that Santana Lopez might be a lesbian, it's actually a one-off joke. Brittany says, if sex was dating, Santana and I would be dating, and everyone like went ablaze. And we were all excited about it, not only talking about it with each other, but really starting to create a demand that we wanted it not to be a joke this time. Creators often don't listen to fans. What was, I think, very special about this moment for Glee was that Naya Rivera listened to fans. And that made the difference. I believe that that is what tipped the needle to make Santana and Brittany a real couple. That couple went on to become one of the cornerstones of the entire series moving forward. It changed Naya's career and it changed the landscape for a lot of us watching at home.
Abuelita, I love girls the way that I'm supposed to feel about boys. It's just something that's always been inside of me, and I really want to share it with you because I love you so much. I want you to know me, who I really am.
So she sits her abuela down at the table, and she begins what's kind of become, in my opinion, one of the most iconic pieces of gay dialogue on television.
And I've tried so hard to push this feeling away and keep it locked inside, but every day just feels like a war. And I walk around so mad at the world, but I'm really just fighting with myself. I don't want to fight anymore.
And that moment, I think more than almost anything else I've seen on television, struck such a chord in me. The way I used to describe it is, if you've ever seen Glee, Santana Lopez, she's full of armor, right? Her tagline is, the only straight I am is straight up bitch. I think it was very important that Santana Lopez was an Afro-Latina. And part of that is because, one, when you look at the landscape for queer Latinas on television before Glee, it's bleak to begin with. And I know I wouldn't have felt the same way if it had been Britney, her girlfriend's coming out scene. I had seen many coming out scenes with white women before that moment. But it mattered that this one felt like that could have been my home. It mattered a lot. That moment, watching Santana Lopez say those words to her abuela gave me a spark to tell my mother that I was gay, and telling my mother that I was gay allowed me to do everything different with my life than what I had been doing before.
See, that's what I'm talking about. That says, I'm here. No, we're here. Yeah, it's me and you for life.
I grew up watching a lot of Spanish language television. And so I saw my parents, I saw my grandparents in those images, which was cool and it felt familiar, but I definitely didn't see myself. On the flip side, the other media that I started to consume was, I guess you could say, American cinema or American media content. And what I saw there were white people. And that was pretty much it. And so I was like, I need to tell my version of the Pretty in Pink and 16 Candles, right? But Aurora style. That felt, grounded in truth. And that's what informed the vision for Mosquita y Mari.
Mosquita y Mari was the first time I saw Latinx, young, brown girls in a circumstance that I felt so close with, so intimately with.
Mosquita y Mari is a story about two 15-year-old Chicanas who are growing up in Southeast LA. And it's about how they are struggling to make sense of the connection that is brewing between them. And so these two girls, who sort of are opposites in some ways, cross each other's paths and start to tap into things in their hearts that are very real, that they never get to really share with anyone.
To see these brown young girls speaking Spanish and dealing with navigating their own feelings and navigating their self-identity, I just cried at seeing that, because that made me feel like, wow, there is space for me on this planet. There are people who understand.
It's a very soft, poetic movie. It feels very personal, and it really spoke to me at that time. And even now, I rewatched it recently, and I hadn't watched it in a few years, and I was bawling again. It just illuminates the nuances, like the very subtle things, and it captures it so well of, being queer and Latina and being young and just figuring that out. And, even in the film, they don't really ever say queer or lesbian, or it's not like, waving a pride flag around, but it's just very subtle in the way it depicted that story.
To be the first Chicana with a feature film in the US, where there's a lot of brown people. It's bittersweet. It's bittersweet. I wish I was the 25th Chicana to have been at Sundance with a feature film, to be honest with you. And that I was the first one, well, shit, it's got to start somewhere. And It started with me. I'm happy about that. And but to be honest, I don't want to be the only one. And my experience at Sundance when I was there, being the only Chicana with a feature there, I felt that. I felt like the kid in the room who was the only brown kid in the room. And I do kind of have a little bit of a story around my premiere because the audience, you know, I brought my crew. Like, I try to bring in as many people of color and brown people to the experience so I could feel their energy in the room. But I think the person that most mattered in that screening for me was my father. My father is someone who is from very humble background from Mexico, someone who has watched my short films and often struggled to understand them because I was bringing so much of the queerness to the table and mixing it with, you know, the bicultural, bilingual stuff, like really immersing it in my cultura. He was in the audience with Mosquita y Mari, and I really wanted to know how he responded because I've always wanted to include my father in the conversation. I never wanted to leave him out. This was as much for him, all my work, than it was for people like myself or yourself, you know? So I remember, like, after my screening, looking for my dad. My mom hugged me. My mom, I can do no wrong with my mom. Hugged me, oh my God, mija, this was amazing. And I was like, thanks, Mom, like, where's Dad? And she was like, no sé. And I was like, oh man. I was like, oh, it didn't land with him, like, it wasn't good. So there was an after party after the screening, and I see my dad in the corner of the room eating chips. And I went up to my dad and I was like, Dad, like, te fuiste, like, what happened? What did you think of the movie? And my dad was like chomping on his chips, thinking, and he was like, you know, yo quiero saber, I want to know. Mosquita y Mari, you know, at the end of the film, like, you know, like, what happened? Like, and he was doing this thing with his hands, and I was like, Dad, did you want them to end up together? Like, by the end of the movie? And he was like, pues no sé, pero, estuviera bueno, no? And he was like, it would have been nice. And I was like, oh my God, Dad, like, wow. You wanted that for them? You hoped that for them? He's like, yeah. And then he unzipped his jacket and he had put a t-shirt on. I had this Si Se Puede t-shirt on, and my dad was wearing his little button-up shirt. He had put the t-shirt over his button-up shirt that said Si Se Puede, Mosquita y Mari. And he unzipped his jacket and he's like, look, I put on your t-shirt. I'm so proud of you, mija. And I was like, wow. It just made that experience just gold for me. And I knew that this film had the capacity to talk to a lot of people beyond the Sundance audience. I was happy.
What's so great about Buffy? It's just a vampire show.
Well, it's an allegory for how strong women are in constant battle with an oppressive, blood-sucking, male-dominated society.
Whoa, Buffy's hot.
I know, right?
Working on One Day at a Time in a writer's room that was so diverse, both in terms of sexuality and gender and race, I think that, you know, it allowed the level of comfort that we were able to have and the level of community and the level of shared humor and shared experience. I mean, I think if I had seen a character like Elena on TV when I was growing up, I think it really would have changed my whole life. I think it would have, it changed my life when I was writing it, just watching it being filmed.
When I think about love, I see myself someday loving a woman.
Oh. Why do I keep giving everyone the wrong sex talk?
Having a Latinx showrunner on a show like One Day at a Time, which is about a Latinx family, I think was completely key and important to being able to make the kind of show we made, and also to keeping the same as the queer story, keeping things honest, keeping things from a place of experience, getting that specificity, which I think we keep learning time and time again, and we keep saying it, but I feel like people still aren't getting it, that the more specific is the more universal.
One Day at a Time is about a family. So they become your neighbors, they become your friends. And once you see them go through these experiences and you get to learn about their identities, especially being queer or non-binary, then they are better equipped to have respect for communities that are different from their own.
When you see those kind of things in the media, when you see somebody you can relate to, it gives you a path to understanding yourself.
I'm gay.
Fabiola Torres on Never Have I Ever is a very sweet, nerdy, geeky, math and science, I've already said nerd, but it is worth saying twice, teenage girl who is a member of a crew of teenage girls who are kind of that, we've never had a boyfriend, we've never been kissed, and the plot of the show is that they are going to fix that they are going to find boyfriends this year. Of course, over the course of the show, Fabiola realizes that the person she is most interested in dating is her classmate Eve. And so that kind of sets up the show for them. So when Fabiola comes out, first she comes out to her robot, Gears Brosnan, which I always have to mention because it is just the sweetest. Like, first of all, the robot's name is Gears Brosnan. And it's just a very sweet, quiet, nerdy moment that we don't often get to see. But the second time that Fabiola comes out, and it's a major plot point for the show, she comes out to her mom. And the thing that makes that very special is that Fabiola's mother is very accepting of it.
Have you been trying to tell me this for a while?
Kinda. But I didn't know how.
Well, that must have been really hard. Oh, honey, I love you. And there is nothing that you could ever tell me that would change that. I just want you to be happy.
Really? You're okay with that?
You don't have to make a big deal out of your kids coming out. You don't have to turn it into a 5-alarm fire. You don't have to throw them a pride parade. You can just love your kid. And that can be enough. That is going to change the world, right? That's going to change your kid's world just to love them. And I think that model that Never Have I Ever presents in that really small scene is going to be really important looking forward.
I think Vida was maybe the first show that was this story about us, really by us, like by a queer Latinx person who seems like Tanya Saracho doesn't even believe in shame, which we need. We need to see more of that. And, things can be hot and horny and not be shameful or exploitative, and we got to do it all, and it was because it was coming from somebody who's lived that experience. And the whole team there made it feel that way. And I think that, I'd never seen that before. When I heard that I was gonna be playing a bottom, I was like, I got get me there tonight. Like I'd never seen that in my life. And I live that, and I've never seen that. I just think just anything under the sun goes, as long as it's consensual, and use it to tell story, and use to say something about the characters. And I think it was done with a lot of love.
It was just really joyful to be given permission. And that's the key, I think, to have gatekeepers that are like us, or are great allies, so that they can defend the story. Because at from beginning to end, from how I staffed my room, from the story I told, I never had to defend it. They were just yes and, like a cultural yes and. And I think we're in the moment that we need those yes and. And then season 2, we added a queer female director, and that was really important, especially for, we're doing more sex scenes in season 2, queer sex scene. When we did the end of season 2 that I directed, and there were these 2 queer actresses, and My cinematographer was queer, my first AD, my second AD, like almost everyone was in there. We're all just queer females. It was like, this is how it should be done. So that gave me freedom and to like grow and it was just a really great experience to be able to tell the story without any like shackles, you know?
I think Vida just doesn't shy away from any iteration of somebody's sexuality, and it never makes a joke of it. It allows people to be beautiful in the bodies that they're in the genders that they are.
And it never takes a sidestep. It never says, well, today we're gonna do this story. It's always all the things. And that doesn't exist. We don't get to see that. So really, when you talk about the queer representation of Vida and what is it, I'm always like, it's the alpha and the omega, it's the show.